The lights of the galactic combat arena blazed across every screen in civilized space. Beings from 1,000 worlds watched as Commander stepped into the ring, his four massive arms raised high. The crowd roared. They always did when he entered. At 9 feet tall with natural armor plating covering his body, the warrior looked like something carved from nightmare and stone. He had never lost, not once in 247 matches. For 15 standard years, had crushed every opponent who dared face him. His species evolved on a heavy gravity world where only the strongest survived. Every child grew up fighting, but was special even among his kind. The galaxy knew him as the Bone Crusher, and the name was earned through years of brutal victories. Today should have been just another easy win. Looked across the ring at his opponent and felt something close to pity. The human woman stood barely above 5 feet tall. She weighed maybe 140 pounds. Her skin looked soft, almost fragile. No scales, no armor plating, no natural weapons at all. Just pale skin, dark hair pulled back tight, and calm brown eyes that watched him without fear. Her name was Sarah. Captain Sarah, according to the registration files, though couldn't imagine what kind of military would send such a delicate creature into combat. Humans were new to the galactic stage, barely a century since first contact. Most species still didn't know much about them except that they were small, weak, and far too confident for their own good. "This is insulting," had told the match coordinator 3 days ago. "I am a warrior. This human is barely worth my time." The coordinator, a nervous with twitching antennae, had shuffled his feet. She won her preliminary matches, Commander, quite decisively actually. "Against what? Other humans?" laughed a sound like grinding rocks. "I have fought. I have broken battle champions. I once killed with my bare hands. This soft skin will last 30 seconds before I must hold back to avoid killing her." The reporters loved it. His interview before the match went viral across the galactic net. He sat in his prep room, barely fitting in the oversized chair, and spoke with absolute confidence. "I will be gentle with the human," he said, his translator rendering his words in a dozen languages simultaneously. "It would be unsporting to truly harm such a delicate creature. Perhaps after 30 seconds she will surrender. I hope she does. I take no pleasure in crushing those who cannot fight back." The interviewer, with 6 eyes, leaned forward. "Some say Captain is quite skilled, Commander. She defeated a fighter in her last preliminary." Waved one of his 4 hands dismissively. "They are quick but weak, perfect opponents for humans. Against real strength, real power, she will understand her mistake. Look at her." He pulled up footage of Sarah's last match on the. "She has no claws, no venom, no armor. Her bones are hollow and brittle. One good strike would shatter her entire body. I must be very, very careful not to kill her by accident." The betting houses agreed with his assessment. Odds for winning sat at 1 to 500. Nobody with sense would bet against him. Every major gambling operation in the sector expected the match to end in under a minute. Some even offered special bets on whether the human would last 15 seconds. In her own prep room, Sarah watched the interview with a slight smile. Her coach, a grizzled human man named Martinez with scars across his face and arms, shook his head. "He's fast for his size," Martinez warned. "Evolved as ambush hunters. He'll try to close distance and grapple. Those 4 arms can generate enough pressure to crush titanium." "I know," Sarah said calmly. She continued her stretching routine, movements smooth and practiced. "I've studied his last 50 matches. He always opens with a charge, tries to overwhelm opponents before they can establish strategy." "And you have a plan for that?" Sarah smiled wider. "Let him think what he wants." Martinez had trained soldiers for 30 years before retiring to coach combat sports. He'd seen plenty of confident fighters get destroyed by underestimating opponents, but he'd also learned to trust Sarah. She didn't think like most fighters. Where others saw obstacles, she saw opportunities. Where others relied on strength, she used precision. Just remember, Martinez said, pride comes before a fall, his pride not yours. The arena seated 50,000 beings and every seat was full. Millions more watched on screens across the galaxy. This wasn't a championship match, just a standard tournament bout, but something about it had captured public attention. Maybe it was perfect record. Maybe it was curiosity about the new human species. Maybe it was just the absurdity of the size difference. The referee, a floating AI sphere, announced the rules in sterile tones. Standard combat regulations. No weapons. No killing. No permanent maiming. Fight continues until knockout, submission, or referee stoppage. The rules were the same ones had followed for 15 years. He barely listened. Sarah stood in her corner, wearing simple fighting gear. Her feet were bare. Her hands were wrapped but not heavily padded. She looked tiny under the massive arena lights, dwarfed by the enormous space and the even more enormous opponent across from her. The pre-match ceremony began. Both fighters approached the center of the ring, towered over Sarah, nearly twice her height. His shadow fell across her completely. The crowd murmured, and several beings in the audience made religious gestures. This looked less like a fight and more like an execution. Look down at the human woman. Up close, she seemed even more fragile. He could see her pulse beating in her neck. Her breathing was slow and steady. Too steady. Didn't she understand what was about to happen? "Little warrior," said, his voice gentle despite his fearsome appearance. "You may forfeit now with full honor. No one will think less of you. There is no shame in recognizing when you are overmatched." Sarah looked up at him. Her expression didn't change. "Thank you for the offer, I'll pass." "I will try not to hurt you badly," continued. "But accidents happen. My strength is difficult to control. If I connect solidly, your bones will break like dried twigs." "I appreciate your concern," Sarah said. Her tone was polite, almost friendly. "Should we get started?" Felt a flash of annoyance. The human didn't seem to grasp the danger. He tried to be kind, to give her an out. If she wanted to learn this lesson the hard way, so be it. He would pull his strikes, use only enough force to knock her down quickly. She'd wake up in medical with nothing worse than bruises and a story to tell. The fighters returned to their corners. The referee sphere rose higher, lights pulsing in sequence. The crowd fell silent. Even the air in the arena seemed to still. Sarah rolled her shoulders, loosened her neck. Her eyes never left. She wasn't watching his face or his hands. She was watching his feet, his weight distribution, the subtle shifts in his stance. Every fighter had patterns, even the best ones. Especially the best ones, because success made you predictable. Settled into his fighting stance, all four arms spread wide. He'd done this hundreds of times. The opening was always the same. Charge hard, close distance, overwhelm with strength and speed. Most opponents froze. Some tried to dodge but were too slow. A few tried to strike first and found their attacks bouncing off his armored hide. The human would probably freeze. They usually did when they saw him coming. The referee's lights hit green. A loud buzzer echoed through the arena. The match had begun. Exploded forward with terrifying speed. His feet thundered against the arena floor. His four arms spread wider, ready to catch the human no matter which direction she dodged. He'd done this charge 1,000 times in training, hundreds of times in real matches. It never failed. Sarah didn't move. She stood perfectly still, watching him come. Her feet remained planted. Her hands stayed relaxed at her sides. The crowd gasped. Was she frozen in fear? Had the reality of facing finally broken through her confidence? 20 feet away, 15 feet, 10 feet. Could already feel the victory. In 3 more steps he'd have her. One quick grapple, a controlled throw, and it would be over. He almost felt bad about it. 5 feet away. Sarah moved. It wasn't a big movement. She didn't leap or roll or desperately scramble away. She simply shifted her weight, turned her hips, and took one smooth step to the side. The timing was perfect, so precise it seemed almost impossible. One moment she was directly in his path, the next she was gone. His momentum carried him forward. He tried to adjust, tried to catch her with one of his four arms, but his own speed betrayed him. He was moving too fast to change direction. His hand grasped at empty air where Sarah had been a microsecond before. As he thundered past, Sarah moved again. This time the movement was purposeful, calculated. Her right leg came up and her foot struck his knee joint, exactly where the hard armor plating met softer tissue. It wasn't a powerful kick. She didn't need power. She needed precision. Felt the impact and ignored it. The human was too weak to hurt him, but 3 steps later he felt something else. A twinge. A slight instability in that knee. Nothing serious, but it was there. He spun around, all 4 arms ready. Sarah stood 15 feet away, back in her relaxed stance. She wasn't breathing hard. She wasn't sweating. She looked exactly like she had before the match started, except now there was something different in her eyes. She was analyzing him, measuring him, like a scientist studying an interesting specimen. For the first time in 15 years, Commander felt the smallest seed of doubt. The crowd was screaming now, but neither fighter heard them. Sarah took a slow breath and settled deeper into her stance, circled left, more cautious now, thinking. The referee's sphere pulsed, marking the end of the first exchange. The real fight was about to begin. Had fought in 300 different arenas across 24 worlds. He'd faced opponents who were faster, some who were smarter, a few who were even stronger. He'd won every time because he knew how to adapt. A good fighter had a plan. A great fighter had multiple plans. A champion knew when to abandon all plans and trust in instinct. He charged again, but this time he watched for the dodge. When Sarah moved, he was ready. His lower left arm swept wide, anticipating her sidestep. He was certain he'd catch her this time. Sarah dropped under his arm instead of moving sideways. She went low, almost to the ground, and his hand passed over her head by inches. Before he could adjust, she was behind him, and her fist struck his lower back where the armor plates separated. Again, it wasn't a strong hit, just precisely placed, just exactly where it would sting. Spun faster than seemed possible for someone his size. He brought all 4 arms around in a devastating sweep that would catch Sarah wherever she tried to go. There was no escape from this move. He'd used it 100 times. It never missed. Sarah didn't try to escape. She stepped forward inside the reach of his arms, too close for them to generate real force. Her elbow came up and struck solar plexus. The armor there was thinner, designed for flexibility. He felt the impact this time, really felt it. Backpedaled, creating distance. His breathing was slightly elevated. Nothing serious, just the normal response to exertion. Sarah had landed 3 strikes now, but none of them had done real damage. Annoying, yes. Impressive technique, certainly. But ultimately meaningless against his superior strength and durability. He just needed to land one good hit, just one. The second round began with both fighters more cautious. Tested Sarah's defenses with quick jabs from his upper arms while his lower arms stayed ready to grapple. Sarah weaved between the strikes, her head moving just enough to avoid each blow. She didn't waste energy with dramatic dodges. Every movement was minimal, efficient. For 5 minutes they exchanged strikes and counters, landed several glancing blows that would have shattered a human skull if they'd connected cleanly. Each time, Sarah rolled with the impact, dispersing the force. She was slippery, hard to pin down, like trying to catch water with your hands. And she kept hitting the same spots: his left knee, his lower back, the soft tissue under his arms. Small, precise strikes that individually meant nothing but were starting to accumulate into something annoying. Round 3. Noticed he was breathing harder, not much, just slightly elevated. His species had powerful lungs, evolved for quick bursts of explosive activity, perfect for ambush hunting. He could maintain this pace easily. Sarah's breathing hadn't changed at all. She looked as fresh as she had before the match started. Round 4. pressed harder, using his size advantage to control the ring. He cut off angles, forced Sarah toward the edges, limited her movement options. This was a tactic that always worked. Smaller opponents needed space to move. Take away the space and you took away their advantage. Sarah adapted. When cut off her left, she feinted right, then ducked under his guard completely. When he tried to corner her, she used his own body as a shield, staying so close his long arms couldn't generate striking power. She was fighting inside his effective range, and every time he adjusted, she adjusted faster. Round 5. Strikes were definitely slowing, not much, maybe 5%, nothing that would affect the match, just the natural fatigue that came from constant movement and exertion. He'd felt this before in long fights. It meant nothing. Sarah's strikes were not slowing. If anything, they were getting faster. Her accuracy was improving. She was learning his patterns in real time, finding the gaps in his defense with increasing ease. The left knee she'd struck in the first exchange was starting to bother him. Not serious pain, just a persistent ache. Every time he put weight on it, there was a slight delay, a tiny hesitation. Sarah noticed. Of course she noticed. Her next 3 strikes all targeted that knee, and suddenly the ache became legitimate pain. Roared and launched a furious combination, all 4 arms striking in sequence. Sarah backed away for the first time, giving ground, and he pursued. Finally she was reacting with the fear she should have shown from the beginning. Except when he reached where she'd been, she wasn't there. She'd baited him into overextending, and now she was beside him, and her fist struck his floating rib with surgical precision. The pain was sharp and immediate. Gasped, his hand going to his side. The armor there was cracked. He couldn't believe it. Human fists weren't strong enough to crack armor. Except somehow, Sarah had found the exact angle, the exact spot, where repeated impacts would create a stress fracture. Round 6, round 7. The pattern continued, couldn't land a clean hit. Every time he committed to an attack, Sarah made him pay for it. His left knee was seriously compromised now. His breathing was labored. His arms felt heavy. How was she not tired? They'd been fighting for over 20 minutes of constant action. His species was famous for their stamina in short bursts, but humans were supposedly weaker in every physical category. Yet Sarah looked like she could fight for hours more. The commentators were discussing it in excited tones that filtered through the arena speakers. I was explaining human physiology to the audience. Humans evolved as persistence hunters, they said. On there, they would chase prey for days until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. They have extraordinary endurance compared to their size. Their cardiovascular system is incredibly efficient. Their cooling system allows continuous exertion, and their ability to process oxygen is remarkable. Another commentator, a combat expert, added context. Commander is stronger and more durable, but Captain can maintain peak performance far longer. Are ambush predators. Explosive power for short periods. Humans are endurance predators. Consistent performance over extended periods. In the ring, was beginning to understand what they meant. Round 8. His trainer signaled for a timeout. Stumbled to his corner, grateful for the 30-second break. He drank water and tried to catch his breath. His trainer, an old warrior named Ash, looked worried. "She's boxing you," Ash said bluntly. "Using distance and timing. You're bigger and stronger, but she's faster and doesn't tire. You need to change tactics." "I know what she's doing," growled. "I just need to land one solid strike." "You've been trying that for 8 rounds. Listen to me. Fight in bursts. We hit hard, hit fast, then rest. This human can fight at the same pace for hours. Your strength advantage means nothing if you're too exhausted to use it." The 30 seconds ended too quickly. Pushed himself up and returned to the center of the ring. Sarah was there already, still looking fresh, still breathing easy, still watching him with those calm, analytical eyes. Round 9. Decided to end it. Pride be damned. Caution be damned. He would throw everything he had into one massive assault, use every bit of his remaining strength before exhaustion claimed him completely. He charged forward with a roar that shook the arena. All four arms struck in a pattern he drilled 10,000 times. High, low, left, right, combinations that covered every possible escape. This was the technique that had won him championships. This was the move that had broken warriors twice Sarah's size. Sarah didn't retreat. For the first time in the match, she moved forward to meet him. The crowd went silent. His brain screamed that this was wrong, that she should be running, but his body was already committed to the attack. His four arms came around in devastating arcs that would crush anything in their path. Sarah stepped inside his guard so close they were almost touching. His long arms couldn't generate force at this range. They passed around her, hitting nothing but air. Before he could adjust, Sarah's strikes began. Left hand to his solar plexus, right hand to his cracked rib, elbow to his lower jaw, knee to his damaged left leg. Each strike came faster than his eyes could track. They weren't powerful hits. They didn't need to be. They were precise, targeted, accumulating damage in spots that were already weakened. Tried to back away, but his left knee buckled. He tried to grapple, but his arms were too slow, too heavy. He tried to use his weight advantage, but Sarah slipped away like smoke. For the first time in his career, Commander dropped to one knee. The arena fell completely silent. 50,000 beings held their breath. Across the galaxy, millions watched in disbelief. Knelt in the center of the ring, one hand on the mat trying to pull oxygen into his burning lungs. His left knee screamed in pain. His rib throbbed. His arms felt like they were made of stone. He'd used everything he had, thrown every technique he knew, and it hadn't been enough. Sarah stood 3 feet away, hands at her sides, breathing steady. Waiting, just waiting. The referee sphere floated closer, lights pulsing in query. Was finished. Did he submit? Slowly, painfully, pushed himself back to his feet. His pride wouldn't let him quit. Not like this. Not kneeling before a human half his size while the galaxy watched. Round 10 was about to begin, and knew he was in serious trouble. The 30-second break between rounds felt like both an eternity and an instant. His corner was chaos. His trainer barked advice while medical staff scanned his knee and ribs. The results were not encouraging. Severe stress on the left knee joint, cracked rib on the lower right side, multiple deep tissue bruises. No permanent damage, but enough to seriously impair his performance. "You can forfeit," Ash said quietly. "There's no shame, you fought brilliantly." Shook his head. "I've never quit a match." "Then change everything. Nothing you've tried has worked. She studied you, analyzed you, and countered every technique. You need to surprise her." Across the ring, Sarah sat calmly in her corner. Martinez was talking to her, but she barely seemed to listen. Her eyes were unfocused, distant. She was reviewing the match in her mind, replaying each exchange, adjusting her strategy for the rounds to come. "He'll change tactics," Martinez said. "Desperation makes fighters dangerous." "I know," Sarah replied. Her voice was steady, clinical. "He has 3 options. He can try to tire me out with clinches and grappling. He can switch to pure defense and hope I make a mistake. Or he can gamble everything on explosive techniques he's been holding in reserve." "Which do you think he'll choose?" Sarah smiled slightly. "All 3 in sequence. He's proud, not stupid." The break ended. Both fighters returned to the center. His movement was noticeably impaired now. He favored his right leg heavily, and his left arms hung lower than his right ones. Fatigue and pain were written across his body language. But his eyes had changed. The casual confidence was gone, replaced by sharp focus. He was taking Sarah seriously now. That made him more dangerous, not less. Round 10 began cautiously, abandoned his aggressive charging style and instead worked to control distance. He used his reach advantage, snapping jabs to keep Sarah at bay. When she tried to close, he circled away. It was smart fighting, conservative, completely different from his usual style. Sarah adjusted immediately. She started cutting angles more aggressively, forcing to move in directions that stressed his damaged knee. Every pivot made him wince. Every weight shift reminded him of the accumulated damage. She was attacking his foundation, making every step cost him something. Minutes passed. The crowd grew restless. This wasn't the explosive violence they'd expected. This was technical, strategic, almost chess-like. Each fighter testing and probing, looking for openings. Then sprang his trap. He faked a stumble on his bad knee, dropping his guard for just an instant. Sarah took the bait and darted in for a strike. Stumble reversed into a blindingly fast double-arm grab. His lower right and upper left hands caught Sarah's shoulders. Finally, he had her. His grip was iron. His species could generate tons of pressure. He began to squeeze, preparing to throw Sarah across the ring or force a submission. This was the grappling strength that had crushed dozens of opponents. Sarah didn't panic. She didn't struggle or try to break free. Instead, she did something didn't expect. She drove her thumbs into pressure points on his inner elbows while simultaneously dropping her weight and twisting. The combination of pain and physics broke his grip in less than a second. Before could react, Sarah was free and had spun behind him. Her arms wrapped around his torso, hands linking under his lowest set of arms. It was a wrestler's grip, solid and technical. She wasn't trying to throw him, he was too heavy for that. She was controlling his posture, limiting his movement, making him carry her weight. For 30 seconds they stayed locked together. Tried to shake her off, but his exhausted muscles couldn't generate enough explosive force. Sarah held on, patient and immovable, waiting for him to waste more energy. When he finally stopped struggling, she released him and stepped back. Round 11 was gasping now. The grappling exchange had cost him dearly. Carrying Sarah's weight on his damaged frame while trying to break free had burned through his remaining reserves. His arms trembled slightly. His stance was uneven. Sarah pressed the advantage. She came forward with a combination of strikes that couldn't fully defend. A punch to his damaged rib made him grunt in pain. A kick to his bad knee buckled it again. He swung wildly with all 4 arms but hit only air. Sarah was always just out of reach or too close to hit effectively. The commentators were dissecting the match in real time. The combat expert sounded amazed. "Captain has fought a nearly perfect tactical match," he said. She identified her opponent's weaknesses, attacked them systematically, and conserved her own energy throughout. This is not luck. This is extremely high-level technical fighting. They added more context. Human beings spent hundreds of thousands of years developing persistence hunting techniques. They would wound prey, then follow it for days until exhaustion and blood loss made it easy to finish. We're watching that same strategy applied to arena combat. Captain has been bleeding Commander's stamina since the first exchange. In the arena, heard the commentary through his exhaustion. He wanted to be angry, to rage against the humiliation of being compared to wounded prey. But he couldn't afford the energy for anger. He needed everything he had left just to stay on his feet. Round 12. Made one last attempt at his original game plan. He loaded everything into a massive overhead strike with his upper right arm. All his remaining strength, all his power, committed to a single blow that would end the fight if it connected. It was a desperate move, a gamble, but he had nothing else left. The strike came down like a hammer, fast enough and powerful enough that if it hit, Sarah would be going to the hospital. The crowd gasped. Several beings looked away, not wanting to see the inevitable carnage. Sarah saw it coming. She'd been expecting something like this. Wounded predators always made one last desperate attack. She shifted her weight, rolled her shoulder, and let the massive fist pass by her head with perhaps an inch to spare. The wind of its passage moved her hair. His fist struck the mat with tremendous force. The impact sent shockwaves through the arena floor. If Sarah had been there, her skull would have shattered. But she wasn't there. She was already moving, already capitalizing on his overcommitment. Her leg swept behind his good knee while her hand pushed his chest. It was a simple technique, one taught to human beginners in their first month of training. Against an opponent who was exhausted, off balance, and overextended, it worked perfectly. Commander, undefeated champion of the Galactic Combat Arena, fell. He hit the mat hard, all 9 feet and 600 pounds of him. The sound echoed through the stunned silence. He tried to push himself back up immediately, reflexes and pride demanding he rise. But his arms wouldn't cooperate. They were too tired, too heavy. His left knee couldn't support his weight anymore. He managed to get to his hands and knees, then stopped. His body simply wouldn't go further. 15 years of victories, 247 straight wins, and he couldn't stand up. His muscles had reached their absolute limit. Sarah stood a few feet away, hands loose, breathing steady. She could have moved in, could have finished him with strikes while he was down. The rules allowed it, but she just stood there, watching, waiting to see if he would rise. Tried again. His arms shook with effort. His good knee came up, trying to push. For a moment it looked like he might make it. Then the knee gave out and he collapsed again. The referee's sphere descended, lights pulsing in sequence. It scanned with multiple sensors, assessing his condition. After a moment, the lights turned red. The sphere's voice echoed through the arena. Fighter is unable to continue. Match awarded to Captain Sarah by technical knockout. The crowd exploded. 50,000 beings erupted into sound. Shock, amazement, disbelief, and sheer excitement poured out in a wave of noise that shook the arena foundations. The upset of the century had just occurred. The impossible had become real. Sarah walked over to where knelt. She extended her hand to him. It was a small hand, pale and soft-looking, attached to an arm that seemed impossibly delicate compared to his massive limbs. Stared at that hand. His pride screamed at him to refuse it, to crawl back to his corner alone, to reject any help from the human who had just destroyed his perfect record in front of the entire galaxy. But he had been a warrior long enough to know when pride was stupidity. Slowly, painfully, he reached up and took Sarah's hand. Her grip was strong, stronger than it looked. She braced herself and helped pull him to his feet, bearing more of his weight than seemed possible for someone her size. When he was finally standing, swaying but upright, she released his hand and stepped back. "You're incredibly strong," Sarah said quietly. "If this had been a pure strength contest, I never would have had a chance." Looked down at her. Really looked at her, not with the dismissive arrogance of before, but with genuine attention. She wasn't even breathing hard. After almost 40 minutes of intense combat, after weathering his most powerful attacks and avoiding hundreds of strikes, she looked like she could fight another 3 rounds without difficulty. "How?" he asked. His voice was rough with exhaustion. "How are you not tired?" Sarah smiled. It wasn't a mocking smile or a cruel one, just honest. Different evolutionary path. Your species evolved to be apex ambush predators. Mine evolved to be the scariest thing on our planet despite being weaker than almost everything else. We couldn't outrun prey. We couldn't overpower it, so we learned to outlast it. The referee sphere was announcing the official decision. Medical staff rushed into the ring to check both fighters, waved them away from him and pointed at Sarah. She was the one who'd taken his strikes. She should be checked first. Sarah submitted to the medical scan with good humor. As expected, she had minor bruising and some muscle stress, but nothing serious. The few strikes that had connected had done remarkably little damage. Scan was less encouraging. He needed immediate treatment for his knee and rib, plus several days of rest. The post-match interview area was chaos. Reporters from 100 worlds clamored for comments. Handlers tried to rush him to medical, but he stopped them. He had something to say, and he would say it now while the galaxy watched. A reporter thrust a microphone toward him. "Commander, you've suffered your first defeat after 15 years. How do you feel?" took a moment to gather his thoughts. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly despite his exhaustion. "I feel humbled," he said. "I underestimated my opponent. I thought I understood what it meant to fight a human. I was wrong." He paused, looking at Sarah, who stood nearby, surrounded by her own crowd of reporters. "I did not lose to a warrior. I lost to an entire species' evolutionary history. Humans are not strong-like, they are not fast-like, but they are patient. They are intelligent, they adapt, and they absolutely refuse to give up." Another reporter shouted a question. "Will you demand a rematch?" "Considered this. Perhaps, in a few months when I have healed, when I have trained specifically to fight humans, but I will never again make the mistake of thinking any opponent is easy." He looked directly at the camera, knowing his words would reach every corner of known space. "To anyone watching who thinks humans are weak because they are small, I tell you this: they do not win by being strong. They win by being smarter, tougher, and more stubborn than you can imagine. They spent 200,000 years learning to hunt animals bigger and stronger than themselves. They are very, very good at it." Sarah's interview was happening simultaneously on the other side of the room. A reporter asked her about her strategy. "Commander is one of the greatest fighters I've ever studied," Sarah said diplomatically. "His technique is excellent, his strength is incredible, and his record speaks for itself. I'm honored to have faced him." "But you defeated him decisively," the reporter pressed. "How?" Sarah thought about her answer carefully. "Humanity didn't become a spacefaring species by being the strongest or the fastest. We did it by being too stubborn to quit and too smart to fight fair. We study our opponents, we learn their patterns, we find their weaknesses, and we outlast them." She smiled. "Also, we evolved doing something called persistence hunting. It's basically chasing an animal until it physically can't run anymore, then walking up and finishing it. Turns out that same translates pretty well to combat sports." The reporter's antennae twitched in fascination. "Some are saying you fought a cowardly match, that you ran away instead of meeting Commander's strength head-on." Sarah's smile didn't waver. "I fought smart. There's a difference. Going strength against strength with an opponent who has superior strength is called losing. Using mobility, timing, and technique to overcome a strength disadvantage is called winning." She paused. "If people want to call that cowardly, they're welcome to step into the ring and try fighting their way. I'll be happy to demonstrate the difference." No one took her up on